if you just drive towards faster, cheaper, better, um, all with equal weighting, right? You may end up being very undifferentiated because you kind of created warm milk, you know? And so I think it really is important that you look at what are your strengths as an organization, what can you tap into that kind of creates that differentiation for you and double down on that, but don't double down on it without understanding how it connects with what your clients need.
Alrighty, we are back, and today we are talking to Monika Rogers, who has been in the market research space for decades, has been a founder, is currently leading growth, has been a leader in client services. You have an incredible background, Monica. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, happy to be here.
Awesome. So to start us off, like let's just talk a little bit about you. You have a ton of different aspects of your background that I'd love to get into today. So can you give us like the 30,000 foot quick overview of kind of your career so far in the market research space?
Sure. I started my career back in CPG at General Mills in Pillsbury. Moved on to work in the ad agency world for a while. Started my own brand consulting. Taught for University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then kind of decided to go out on my own. So I started a brand consultancy first. Ran that for a number of years. Came up with an idea for a tech solution, founded and grew tech platform Digsite, which I sold about 2 years ago. And since I have been back on the research consulting side and am currently leading growth strategy at CMB.
That was a great summary. And literally within that 1 minute summary, there's like 100 things that we could jump into. We won't have time for all of them today. So where I actually wanted to like start to dig in, no pun intended, is with Digsite. So you're in a really unique position here where you've not only been in the research and insight space for a long time, but you were also a founder of a company that was not just a consultancy, but also a tech platform. So, can you kind of kick us off by talking about what inspired you to start Digsite? What was the sort of need you saw in the market that you were trying to fulfill? And then I'd love to get into some stories about starting and growing that company.
Sure. At the time, you know, the use of Facebook for market research was kind of a new and novel idea. At the same time, clients were really struggling post the Great Recession to deal with smaller teams, smaller budgets. And so they were looking for new and innovative ways to work, to get market research done, looking to work a lot more quickly. And at the time, there was this solution called online communities that had gained quite a bit of traction, was growing pretty quickly, but on average took about 4 to 5 weeks to set up. And online qualitative at the time only had about like, I don't know, it was in the double digits of usage. So maybe between 10 and 20% of companies were using online qualitative methodology. So I saw a huge opportunity there. I figured if I didn't do it, somebody else would. And so I just went after it and tried to figure out how to solve the problem of how to do better qualitative in the era of social media.
So let's talk about kind of the early days at Digsite. And there's two angles I really want to get into here. One, there's the entrepreneurship angle, which I'm sure you have a lot of great stories there. And then two is really how you went about sort of iterating and understanding the needs of market researchers. So let's actually start with the latter. You said you're trying to kind of crack the code of how people could do better qualitative research online. What were some of the early problems that these researchers were running into, and what were you offering that was kind of a different solution or a better solution?
Yeah. So there were what were called bulletin boards back in the day. Uh, I mean, even the language seems so antiquated now, but where people would have conversations online, it kind of you were kind of like a a lab rat if you were a participant, right? You were going to this space that wasn't familiar to you, and you were answering questions, and companies were getting stuff out of it, but it wasn't like they would just get a big transcript basically out of this thing, and kind of treat it like a focus group, which it really wasn't. So that was some of the things that I saw that were maybe barriers to adoption. And of course, barriers to adoption to using a platform like Facebook for market research was data privacy, data ownership, issues that didn't really allow companies to do things like share concepts, things like that. So I was really trying to meld those two things together to say, how could I set something up really quickly? So in my mind, that was like same day, overnight, right? And then kind of how could I build a platform, build the team, figure out the processes and approaches to to making the reporting of that information much more digestible so that people could iterate. And at that time, I was really into Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup. So that was kind of in my mind. And so I really wanted to experiment and iterate my way through the development of the product. And what's really cool is when you build a research platform for qualitative insights, you can use that with your own clients to get their feedback on the platform. So you kind of have the dual benefit there. So that was a really helpful process for me, which was to engage companies that were interested in this and say, hey, try this out. And then at the same time, as I think about building new features or we think about expanding platform capabilities, would you participate in a Digsite to help us get that feedback? So we use that process to help us along the way.
That was actually going to be my next question, which was sort of a meta question, which was, the extent to which you did research with the researchers you were working with, and trying to serve. I'd be interested to hear what was some of the feedback that you got in those early days, because I think this will be interesting to our audience because it's kind of taking us back to like what were the main barriers and sort of the most pressing requests or needs that you got from folks at that time, and well that'll help us contrast with kind of where we are now, which is obviously in a quite different place. So yeah, what were you hearing from the folks you were working with or having participate on your dig site?
It's probably the same things that tech companies are hearing today. Honestly, it's the same set of problems, just applied slightly differently, right? I need to meet my security requirements for my company. I need to make sure, right? And back then it was these massive questionnaires that you would get, right, to fill out. I don't, I mean, we still have massive security requirements, right? That's still a big thing. Another big piece of it was, well, wait a minute, I'm used to doing research in this linear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of approach. This isn't linear. How do I fit this in? Wait, I always ask questions this way. Oh, I always do things this way, right? All of that stuff where it's like, yes, and that makes a lot of sense. Here's another way we could approach it. Does that still meet your needs, right? And getting people comfortable with the idea that we could do these things simultaneously rather than sequentially. That's still an interesting challenge. And when you think about ChatGPT and all the generative AI solutions, it's kind of that same thing, right? Like all of a sudden you're taking things that you used to do sequentially and now you're kind of doing them all simultaneously. And it's a little disorienting to someone who's used to, and let's face it, and us market researchers, we have our comfort zone, right? We're used to being in this comfort zone. And so I think that was a big part of this was just getting people comfortable with doing things differently. And that tended to attract a certain audience, right? There were certain researchers who were really looking to innovate, who were really looking to try new things. And those were the ones that stepped up and said, hey, I want to try this. I want to give you feedback on it. Here are my thoughts and ideas. And that kind of collaborative thing kind of kept it going. But the product definitely evolved pretty significantly. And I mean, one of the big evolutions, and this happened within the first, I don't know, probably in the first year. So was the whole agile movement. So imagine that at the time, Google sprints was just becoming a thing, right? That was like design sprints was kind of a new thing and happening. I started a tech company where I had to hire developers and I wasn't familiar with all that. So I learned agile development because that's what we did. So we did, your typical software sprints, 2-week cycles, right? Well, in the meantime, I'm learning design sprints. I'm learning agile, right? And my background in training, design thinking, and lean startup, and jobs to be done, right? So I got all this stuff kind of burgeoning in my head, and it really kind of hit me that one of the reasons that people were struggling to adopt new technology tools, and Digsite in particular at that time, was because we were giving them a blank canvas and saying, here's a canvas, go do research with it. And they're like, okay, but again, that doesn't fit with my process. And so that's when we kind of developed and launched Digsite Sprints, where we put the sprint process and a lot of the agile thinking on top of the platform for them, so that they didn't have to figure out the process. We already had that kind of built in with the technology. And that's when we really took off as a company, was when we gave them the process and the scaffolding to make them feel safe doing this innovative thing, and they understood how to do it quickly, and we were providing the right supports to enable their success.
So much of what you're saying resonates with me personally because I feel like even though this story is from a number of years ago, we're going through a lot of this similar things at Reveal AI. Massive security questionnaires, that's a huge one. Finding the right partners who want to innovate, creating scaffolding within the product to make it really accessible instead of handing. I mean, literally what you said, handing someone a blank canvas. You find that is actually one of the worst things you can do. You need to give them some structure. So it's very interesting to me and also validating to hear that this some of these hurdles to adopting a new technology in the research space are not necessarily new. Um, so if we fast forward a bit, you ended up selling Digsite. Can you kind of talk about uh, what led you to sell it, and then we can get into kind of some of your subsequent roles uh, after.
Yeah, I think what was really interesting for me is how everything kind of shifted with the pandemic. And when you start a tech company and you get outside investors, there is a particular expectation, right? You're part of a fund, and that fund has a particular time frame, and that particular time frame happens to be 7 years, and 7 years happened to be right when the pandemic hit. So we were in the process of contemplating the sale kind of coming into the pandemic. And so it was a really interesting and difficult time to figure out timing, right? When do you go up for sale? How do you go up for sale? What does that look like? But from my vantage point, um, it was really about the investors that had come along with me, right, in this journey, and making this something that was fitting what they wanted. I never had intended to own Digsite forever. My initial conception was 3 to 5 years. So the fact that I had made it 7 was just kind of a kick in the pants to say, okay, it's time. But it was definitely a really interesting and challenging process to go through the whole sale of your company. And then afterwards, right, that moment of like, okay, now what? And you can't think about it while you're in it. You can't spend a minute thinking about what's next while you're in it, because then you'll be out of the game. So you have to just stay ahead of the game all the way till the finish line. And then it's like, okay, now what?
Well, let's talk about the now what then. So after the sale of Digsite, you moved on to lead client services at Illuminous, and there are some particular aspects of the kind of client services side of things that I'd love to get into here. Um, Basically, you in that role, you have a lot of insight into what clients are sort of demanding of research teams and products and deliverables in today's market. So, can you start us off with maybe a high level overview of what are some of the main things that you're seeing clients push for, um, from their research partners, and then we can maybe get into some of the specifics of how research teams are delivering on these new types of demands and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, and you hear this in conferences and what kind of elsewhere as well. I think there's so much change going on right now, right? I mean, just an exorbitant amount of change. There's so many new tools and technologies, not only that, but clients are trying to build their own Gen AI solutions, right? So there's just a ton of pressure to deliver in this rapidly changing environment. And research teams aren't given more budgets, right? Right now, there's a lot of belt tightening out there. And so they're trying to make it work within that environment, more for less, the same theme as the 10 years before. But I think the difference is the acceleration in the amount and number of tools and platforms that are available. So from a client services perspective, or even from any kind of organization that's providing services, right? Not just technology. I think one of the things that really is important is for us to understand and have a point of view on how do we use technology in our work, right? And providing the comfort for that client that we are using the right tools and tech for their particular problem or challenge, right? And so it's not it's understanding their industry, it's understanding their business, it's understanding their problems, but it's also understanding all the tools and technology that exist that you can leverage against that, and then making those things kind of work together pretty seamlessly, right? And then the other piece of it is, you know, kind of a level of, I want to call it almost emotional support, but you have to understand when you're in client services that the people that you're working with are human beings and they're within organizations that have their own politics and challenges and issues, and they're trying to navigate their careers within that. And so another big component of this is just the human side of it. Like, how do you help this person achieve the results that they're trying to achieve in the organization so that they can meet their own career goals? And so that sometimes just has to do with how responsive you are, and how thoughtful you are, and how much you can take a load off of them, anticipate their problems or needs rather than responding to their issues and needs. And so I think that kind of concept of anticipation is just kind of foundational to client services today, in the past, in the future, and really is what kind of drives success in your work.
That's very, very well said, and it gives me a couple of different directions I'd like to go. One is, in today's market, how do you see market research firms being able to differentiate themselves? So you touched on some great points there, which is uh, one is very simple but very powerful, which is be a human being, right? And so you're partnering with your clients. You need to understand their industry, their problems on a very deep level, and you also need to connect with them on a human level. But like you're saying, there's so much innovation happening. There's so much acceleration happening where, it seems like everyone I talk to, they're telling me their clients are asking for, faster, cheaper, better, all at once. I need it yesterday. And if I can't get it from you, I'm going to go next door. So there's just this wave of sort of innovation and, pressure being felt by these firms. What are some of your insights about how to differentiate beyond what you've kind of touched on so far?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, advice I would give is always to build from your strengths. I mean, look at who you are as an organization, foundationally, the skills, the talents, the backgrounds that you have, right? What is it at your core that you're really, really known for and good at? And never forget that, right? Because if you just drive towards faster, cheaper, better, um, all with equal weighting, right? You may end up being very undifferentiated because you kind of created warm milk. And so I think it really is important that you look at what are your strengths as an organization, what can you tap into that kind of creates that differentiation for you, and double down on that, but don't double down on it without understanding how it connects with what your clients need. And there is a funny, we had our company meeting last week, and I shared one of my favorite quotes. It's a Ted Lasso quote, and it really has to do with basically if you're comfortable riding a horse, you're probably riding it wrong. And I think that that kind of mantra is my current, like my favorite mantra within these organizations, which is if you're comfortable, you're doing it wrong. Like you need to be uncomfortable. So while I say pull from your strengths, that kind of gives you your centering. Now you got to lean way forward on those skis and go try new things and figure out new ways that leverage your strengths in new ways. And if you're not doing that, I think 5 years from now, it's going to be very difficult for you to be competitive in the marketplace.
That's really interesting. I like that, on the surface, those almost seem like two different things. Like one is play to your strengths and the other is try new things. But the way you're kind of framing it is, yeah, the strengths should really sit at the center of what you're doing and who you are. And then you need to sort of take that comfort zone or, zone of competence and sort of grow it by finding new ways to kind of create leverage for your organization. So I'd be curious just to hear, what are some of those forms of leverage or differentiation that you see organizations being able to create? I mean, one that comes to mind is obviously technology. There's just so much happening um, in that space. But beyond that, is there anything else, any other sort of insights that you have for these organizations who are trying to follow this advice?
There's lots of ways you can kind of differentiate yourself, right? And what's so funny about insights as an industry is sometimes we don't learn, we just it's the cobbler and the shoes issue, right? We just don't, we know all this stuff. We are out there for our clients every day. We know, right? We know branding, we know brand strategy, right? So the fundamentals you can leverage based on your heritage of your company, where you came from, the values that you have, right? That can be things like um, I mean, Zappi went after being a B corporation, right? They use that as one of their different points of differentiation and leverage for their organization. You can go after your um, your your people or your consultative nature or all of those things as your core strength. You can use specific benefits that you've offered for your clients, right? So maybe you specialize in a particular type of methodology or particular kind of outcome or a particular way that you go about doing your work. um, Technology itself, I'm not sure is a differentiator for a consulting practice, but it could be. You could develop your own proprietary tech or your own proprietary mechanisms, right? Or a lot of organizations, CNR research comes to mind, mentions, hey, we're agnostic, right? We use all sorts of different tools and we pick the best tools for the specific situation. So there's different ways that you can approach technology, but the reality is if you're not adopting technology at a very rapid pace right now, you're behind because everybody else is. And we saw that at CMB, we went to IEX. I mean, not only have we, with our own product development team been building a whole bunch of new solutions and are working on new things, but we saw the difference between 1 year ago at that conference when people were like, is AI going to take our jobs, to this year, a whole bunch of new solutions being launched and people talking about and experimenting with new ways of conducting research. And it's not necessarily all client facing tools where the client is in the tech doing stuff. A lot of it is things that are happening behind the scenes, right? Where we're using specific tools. So at CMB, we have like theme AI and emotion AI and tools that we've built in-house. We also have third party companies that we work with to do other kinds of specialized analysis. They're evolving their tools, right? And we're seeing it in all of our platforms, even on the sales and marketing side, right? There's new tools and platforms that we're using. If you haven't gotten the Gen AI sales email lately, it's kind of surprising because I think I've gotten like several just in the last few weeks, and they're dreadfully wrong, like horribly wrong, right? They've got they're just awful. But they're going to get better, and we have to figure out, and you have to decide as an organization, again, how far over the skis do you want to lean? Do you want to go to the bleeding edge where you're okay with the fact that you're sending an email that's completely wrong? Or are you wanting to be like the company that's like, no, I've got this all vetted and figured out, and we validated this stuff. So I think there's a lot of choices in there on where you want to land in the spectrum of early adopter versus late adopter, and all of that as well. That can be a differentiator on both sides of that continuum as well.
Uh, that gives me sort of a next question, which is in terms of sort of the innovation you're seeing in the technology space. I see you post a lot on LinkedIn about different AI solutions that are coming out. Um, I guess what's most interesting to you, or conversely, where do you think there's like basically snake oil trying to be sold within the industry? It'd just be great to get your take on like where you see value sort of accruing for market researchers amidst this huge like wave in technology innovation, and where you think maybe some of the hype is going to fizzle out, and 6 months or 18 months from now we're going to say, hey, remember when everyone was convinced that the future was X, and then and then that never came to pass. Be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the question really becomes how broad or narrow are the use cases of these specific technologies, and where are they in their ability to deliver, right? I mean, if you've tried Copilot, you're probably like, yeah, it's kind of disappointing, right? But a year from now, maybe like really kick ass, who knows? But right now, not so much. And so I think that's more what I'm seeing. I see a huge potential for synthetic data. I see potential for AI agents and assistants. I see huge potential for um, a lot of tools and tech related to tapping into the existing information that we have, right, in order to do things better in our daily jobs. That the process, all the way from questionnaire design all the way through analysis and reporting, there's just opportunities at every step of the way. Probably have seen 100 different tech tools that look promising, and this is super challenging for people, because how do you get through all of this? So I'm very, very happy to have a dedicated team that's doing this at our company, because I couldn't do it all myself. But I'm enjoying the process of listening, and learning and experimenting, and kind of we're taking that very, uh, you know, uh, in my life, I'm taking this approach of I want to learn as much as I can. I want to have as many conversations as I can. And I want to figure out where I can add the most value now. Um, but I'm okay with something not working as well as I wanted today, and revisiting that 6 months from now or a year from now, rather than saying, oh, that vendor doesn't work for me. I don't think I think if you take that approach, those vendors that you evaluated last year or the year before and said no to might be the vendors that are like perfect today for your needs. And so that becomes another challenge, particularly for clients. I mean, there's just so much for them to vet. And then for agencies, it's the same thing. So many technologies for us to vet and figure out, which is the most relevant, which is the most useful for us in our jobs. And that is, I think, taking up more and more of our days than it had 5 years ago, and more than it had the 5 years before that.
Yeah, I mean, the point you're making about how quickly these things are changing, I mean, as someone who's sitting within one of these software companies, it even blows my mind, right? Like, you're not the company you were 6 months ago today, right? New models come out, new innovation, like breakthroughs kind of happen, and all of a sudden, when those innovations happen, say at the kind of AI model layer, all that value instantly accrues to the startups who are building on them, right? And then as those startups get better, all that value instantly accrues to the people who are leveraging that technology as end users, right? And that's one thing that I think is really unique about where kind of the research and insight space is right now, which is like you said, the vendor that wasn't right 6 months ago, they might be a completely new and different company at this point, and I don't know that there's been a time in history where, 6 months ago, you could look at a vendor and say, I don't know, it's getting there, but it's not quite good enough," and they can actually come back in 6 months and say, "We're new and improved," and actually mean it, right? It's not it's not just sales and marketing. It's like, "No, this is, 10x where it was 6 months ago or 12 months ago." So, to your point, I mean, the pace of innovation is just absolutely wild right now. And I appreciate your perspective of it's really a time to learn and kind of lean in and acknowledge that not everything is going to work today and not everything is going to work perfectly in the long run either. But there is just so much opportunity happening at every step of sort of the research process that, from my perspective, it is totally necessary to sort of be learning. And if you have the luxury of having an entire team dedicated to this, that seems like a huge plus because there's just so much to wrap your head around, right? So I know we're coming up on time here. I'd love to just touch on kind of where you are in your current role now. So I know you're leading growth at CMB. Sounds super exciting. Great time to be growing a research firm. Can you just give us a sense of kind of what your day to day looks like right now? Kind of what some of your longer term. Hopefully, that's not the wrong question to ask.
No,
Uh,
it's been really, really fun. I mean, I've only been in this role for 6 weeks now. It's been really, really exciting to get an opportunity to really get to know the company. What's interesting about this role is that it's new to the organization. So, part of this is finding the way. It's really integrating sales and marketing together with and kind of leveraging client services and product development and innovation, uh, kind of to really, I say, accomplish two things. One is really navigate our go-to-market strategy. That is going to change. That will continue to change and evolve because everything in the market is changing, right? So we need to understand how to meet our customers where they are, how to help them solve the problems that they have, how to get through the process, right? Better. But then the other side of it that I'm really focused on is what product market fit, right? And so this is really about what are the solutions that we're developing, what are the solutions we're delivering, and how does that fit with what our clients are needing and how they're needing to deliver their work. So I'm really focused a lot right now on that specific aspect because there is a need to really kind of connect those dots, nice and tightly. And then, the activation piece, right? So really not just understanding what they need and making sure we're delivering that, but having conversations that we help each other across the industry more broadly, right? How do we advocate for our own industry? Because insights is always, and has been since I started in this industry, it's always been this question, right, of whether we have a seat at the table or whether we're relevant or whether we're going to, this is being democratized. Does that mean that we're no longer of value? We become more and more and more critical to organizations because we see how bad AI can be and how good AI can be. And that means we have an opportunity to lead in that area. And so, from my vantage point, my role is really about drawing those connections between what our clients need or are looking for, what we can deliver as an organization, and then together what we can deliver as an industry. And so it's a really fun, big, meaty, challenging job that I suspect it will take me a little time uh, to feel comfortable. Maybe I won't feel comfortable ever in this role because it is really, about growth. And I think, one of the questions you would ask me early on have led me to talk about that kind of being uncomfortable thing. And that's one of the things I feel most uh, I appreciate the most about having started my own company and started my own tech company is that I really got comfortable with ambiguity and with navigating change. And so I'm in a role here where I can have fun doing that, where I'm not afraid of having those conversations and opening those doors. But I'm also in an organization of really smart people, and they're the ones walking through those doors. What I'm doing is just opening the doors for them, and they get to walk through the doors and they get to create the success in the organization. And I'm just kind of guiding that process. And so that's kind of what I'm up to. And it's been pretty interesting so far.
That's awesome. And I think one question just to kind of wrap up here is, what advice would you give to other folks in our audience who are listening, who are working at maybe similar sized market research firms? Maybe they're independent research consultants, and they are also trying to figure out how to have a seat at the table, as you said. That's something that I see a lot as I talk to folks all across the research industry, individual researchers all the way up to leaders at larger organizations. It's figuring out how to really demonstrate the value that research and insights professionals and firms can provide today, why it's actually more important now than ever. Because I agree, there are some folks who are saying, oh, can't we just do this ourselves? Do we really need this? So what advice do you have for them, as they try to kind of create that seat at the table for themselves and demonstrate the value, of research and insights, broadly speaking?
Yeah, I think my advice would be to think about market research and insights as a game of chess. Um, it isn't about, it's not accounting. We don't need to just look backwards. We don't just need to, you know, check off the data, pull together the report, prepare the findings, be factual. We actually need to look several steps ahead on the chessboard. And that's not just for ourselves, but for our clients. And if we bring them a point of view, not just on so what, but on now what, and that now what isn't just about the decision that's right in front of the client, but is thinking with them about what it means down the road. I think that's when you really add value and when you become a partner, is when you're really looking at that longer term view, and you're playing the game of chess. And so that's my advice is to really think deeply and meaningfully about how to add long term value to client relationships.
That is amazingly well said. Monica, this has been such a wonderful discussion. I feel like we have touched on almost every part of the industry, from, entrepreneurship and being a founder, to leading growth, to client services, themes in technology. I mean, we kind of hit it all in this chat. So I wanted to say thank you so much for being here today. Do you have anything you want to tell our audience about, where to find you or how to check out CMB? Any sort of on ramps to learn more about you as we kind of wrap here?
Yeah, definitely find me on LinkedIn and connect. I'm kind of a little bit addicted to posting and chatting and connecting with people. So always happy to provide advice, just connect on questions or challenges you may have in the industry at large. Tend to be at some conferences, but maybe not all of them. So I hopefully can catch up with you there as well, but look forward to connecting with all my industry colleagues. It's an amazing time to be in this industry, and all the fears and hopes and all that wrapped up in a big bow. Hopefully, we can go and get through this together, slay the dragon together.
Awesome. Well, Monica, thank you so much for being here today. It was an absolute blast talking to you, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Sounds great. Thanks, Zach.